I will no longer ever do any of those things.
Does that include that's what she said?
Yes.
Wow, that is really hard. You really think you can go all day long? Well, you always left me satisfied and smiling, so.
That's what she said.
Michael, please.
Before we begin, here's a quick disclaimer. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or therapy. Nothing shared on this show should be taken as professional guidance. If you're struggling or feel you may be in crisis, please call 988. Reach out to a qualified mental health professional or someone you trust who can connect you with immediate support, or call 911 for emergencies. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everyone, to the Man Up Together podcast. My name is Alex Peskin, and I'm here with my lifelong friend and co-host, Bobby Jacobs. You may see that we have a little bit of a different setup today, and if you're only listening, you might hear a little bit of a different experience because we are actually not sitting in the same place for the first time ever. Happy holidays to everyone. Bobby, your family came to you, and I went to see my family, so...
Yeah,
we're trying out something a little bit new here.
Yeah, we had a good Passover here in Atlanta with the family. Had people come in from Florida and Tennessee, and it was good to have everybody there. Happy holidays, happy Passover, happy Easter. Hope everybody had a great holiday with family. We're gonna try something new here. We're gonna virtually man up together. How's that?
There we go.
Love it.
Always better together, and if you could be in the same room, that's great. And if not, there's always a workaround, always ways to reach out to people who can be there for you. So we're going to try that out on our end as well.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right. So today, for Why Do Men Like This, we're going to do mansplaining, and then we're also going to explore Michael Scott from The Office as our character for today, because that is a man of
He's a man. He's a unique man. Can't wait to dive into Michael Scott with you. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited to get into our Why Do Men Like This also. I think it relates, right? I think it's pretty, mansplaining in Michael Scott, right?
Yes, for sure. We said early on, maybe they're not all going to connect, but we've realized if possible, we're just going to do ones that at least a little bit connect.
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
Let's do it.
All right. So for today's,
Why do I like this?
we are going to do mansplaining.
Can I explain mansplaining to you, Alex? Would that help a little
Would
bit?
you like to mansplaining?
I think I can mansplain mansplaining, right?
Okay.
So for those who don't know what mansplaining is, I'm going to do it right now.
This is actually really hard to keep a straight face for.
Right. So, I think the easiest way to define mansplaining is typically it's when a man will explain something that may or may not need explaining in a way that could be condescending, but it's something that I think that we find that men do. I think it's absolutely something true. I'm sure I have caught myself doing it in the past, more than just now, mansplaining.
So why do men mansplain? Goodness. Yeah. Why do men mansplain?
Here's something I was thinking about outside of not wanting there to be silence, right? So I think we talked about this a little bit last episode in the manosphere conversation, in not wanting there to be silence in a conversation relative to insecurity. One of the things that I thought about was, do men mansplain to try and set a social hierarchy of sorts, right? To figure out where they lie in the hierarchy of knowledge, right? Because I think what's interesting to me is that oftentimes mansplaining is about topics, about issues, about things that for all intents and purposes have very little relevance. And I think that part of it is because we're trying to just set ourselves apart in terms of, oh, I know this random fact or not.
Oh, that's interesting, right? So you're talking about bringing it together with last time when we talked about why do men pick on each other, and so much of that was hierarchy and listening to you talk about this, I feel like it makes so much sense. If I'm talking, I'm the important one in the moment. And if I talk more than other people, if I know more than other people, I must be higher up on that hierarchy. Huh.
I think there's something about being the center of the conversation. And if you can control that conversation, I think there's something about that. I think there's another aspect of mansplaining. I did I'll say research. It wasn't intense research, guys. I Googled this a little bit and read a couple of articles. There's the aspect of mansplaining around relationships and early
Mm.
relationships and dating where you're trying to
You see
impress the
how valuable of
person.
a partner I am right now? Because I
Yeah,
can say random
I know
facts
all the
about things you
answers.
were actually talking about first.
Exactly, right? So I think there's something here about how do we elevate ourselves? How do we elevate ourselves in the eyes of the people that we are interacting with, in the eyes of the people that we're trying to make like us? When I think about it, it's all about setting yourself up differently, right? I don't want to, I don't want to just say this as like it's making
Set
yourself
yourself apart.
yeah, I think it's setting yourself apart. It's setting yourself up to be the person that's remembered at least in the next 30 seconds. Maybe
Mhm.
not forever, but at least in the next 30 seconds, you're going to be the person that goes, "Hey, he came up with that ridiculous thought or he mansplained that to me and I maybe didn't like
Jockeying
how it
for
felt."
position, right? It's jockeying for
Right. I
position.
like that a lot.
Yeah,
So, all
yeah.
right, so what are some of the positives of
Yeah,
mansplaining,
let's
Alex?
talk about this. This will be good. What are the
Right.
positives of mansplaining? I think if I have to think of something, it would be that sometimes, randomly, you might learn something interesting.
There
Maybe.
you go. If
Like,
you ask the right question to the right person at the right time, and they
that's not
have that
mansplaining though, Bobby, right? That like mansplaining is
true,
not if you ask the right question at the right time. I
true, you're
feel like,
right. No, you're
okay,
right.
you know what? Let's move into the possible downfalls, negatives,
Well, the
whatever we want to call
possible
it, of mansplaining because I think we're getting into it
we're
right now.
missing it,
I
yeah.
think one of the big ones is that the person doing it isn't often reading cues correctly
Yeah.
to know that this is actually something that I should be sharing because maybe the people in the room don't know, or maybe it's applicable to what we're talking about in the first place. And
Yeah, I agree. I think the other part of it that could be, and as I think about a drawback, is if you're setting yourself up as someone who understands that topic because you've now explained it to them in your way, but you actually don't know what you're talking about.
oh yeah, I think that
Not
actually is a
necessarily,
very common part of mansplaining. Also, it's I
right?
need to be the one saying something, jockeying for position, and so I'll
Right.
I'll take like any thread I've got and run with it.
I think the other thing too is we think about that jockeying for position, that social hierarchy. Just because someone isn't speaking or just because someone isn't mansplaining, it doesn't mean that they may not want to be involved in that conversation. People interact in different ways, in the way that they feel comfortable, in the way that they are able, like you said, to read a situation, in the way that they're
Yeah,
able to understand cues. So I think that there's a part of this where the act of not mansplaining sometimes maybe is just as important to recognize as the art of
yeah,
mansplaining for that
yeah.
person.
And I think where it becomes tricky is someone who might actually know more about the situation might also be reading cues differently and say, I don't need to be sharing this right now. So now this other person is talking, and like people in the room might be like, Alex, you're talking a lot about equine nutrition right now as if you're an expert here, but Bobby's like, what? Why are we not asking him these questions?
Good
Right? Like, I
question.
feel like
It's a
that
good
would be a
question.
good example of me not reading
Well, so
the room well, and you reading and being like, I don't think I need to deep dive into this right now. But for some reason, Alex was like, yeah, oh, let me tell you about this thing that I know very little about.
right. All right. So I'm going to ask you a question. Besides just now, well, at least the beginning of this conversation, have you been mansplained to?
I can't
Sure.
one right now, but I can tell you one thing that I am very self-conscious around. I am a therapist, so when I am in the room with a couple especially, I'm always very careful to think, am I about to explain something that they already understand or maybe understand better, and is there a way I can be talking about it with them where I'm not doing that because I'm so afraid, and I probably shouldn't be. It's probably not the end of the world if I am caught mansplaining. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a dire situation. I feel very nervous that I'm gonna do it. And so
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially in that position, right? Because people are coming to you for essentially for help, right? They're looking for someone to talk to work things through in their relationship or personally. Right?
Mhm.
And I think the last thing that you want maybe as a therapist is to come across as, well, this guy's just like speaking down to me. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
I understand that.
But
And
he's
I
like
think
explaining my life experience to me right now.
right, right, exactly. And I think, yeah, it's something for sure that I would definitely want to be cognizant of. And again, probably another reason that I'm not
Yeah.
in therapy or not a therapist. I'll say it
Right.
that way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, however, right, I can't necessarily think of a time where I've been mansplained too, but I was talking to some people yesterday. They were asking, "What's your Why Do Men Like This?" for this week's episode, and I said, we're gonna do mansplaining, and they liked that. And one of the things that they brought up was where I think one of them 2 women, one of them had been pregnant or working on getting pregnant at the time, and a man explained, like, the duration of pregnancy to them, and so they brought up a point that I don't know if I would have fully thought about, which also makes me think, I bet you women would do a better job at Why Do Men Like This for most things, but especially for mansplaining, because they called out the idea that oftentimes what happens is a man is explaining something to someone who for sure knows better than them. And again, they're just missing the cue. And that's a big cue miss there.
Right.
So,
So I love that you brought that up. So I was going to tell a story here. I travel a lot for my job. I'm in airports a lot. And I was sitting in the airport waiting for a flight one day, and they announced that there was a delay from a mechanical issue, right? And the gentleman next to me or across from me, close enough proximity that I could hear him, who was talking to a young lady who he didn't know before this. I had been sitting long enough to watch a lot of this interaction, started to explain to this woman all about mechanical issues on airplanes and went into a very long description. He didn't realize this, but behind him was the pilot of our airplane, which was having the mechanical issue, who turned around and said, well, you're almost right. And corrected it. And so maybe not like, traditional mansplaining because it, wasn't necessarily, but it was
I
a
think it's a
very
pretty close
interesting,
one, though.
it was a pretty interesting conversation. And definitely, something that gave me a laugh as I was sitting waiting for a delayed flight. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
that's,
anyway,
I like that
mansplaining.
one because it's that idea of I'm gonna say it in a way that sounds really confident. I for sure know. Maybe I'm trying to like work my way up that ladder there. Oh, that person right behind me is an expert, and we probably
The
should like,
the
hey,
expert.
what is going on right now? And I think that's something to be thinking about as well, right? We're trying to jockey for position here, sometimes trying to prove our worth if it's with someone who we might be interested in, whatever it is. It makes me think, what are other ways maybe that could be more effective? And sometimes listening, being curious, reading social cues better, uh, are better ways, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes we can put ourselves in a position to want to learn something, and that actually might
absolutely.
make people feel even more comfortable around us. And um, if we're talking about jockeying for position, I want to say almost like can give us even more power. But how are
Absolutely.
we measuring the power? The power of I trust this person, not because they can fact at me, but because
Right.
they can show that they want to truly understand something and they don't have to take over in order to get there. And so it's just something that I think about.
Yeah, well, and to give, the pilot, right, credit who didn't mansplain, he didn't look at the guy and say, "You're full of it." You're almost right. And I like the way that he said that, right? He gave him a little bit of like, "Hey, pat him on the back just a little bit." And so
Mm.
one of the things too that I think is really important. I do a lot of technical talks and talk to large groups of people, and as I teach students, right, to do public speaking, one of the things that I always think is super important is the concept of it's okay to tell someone you don't know the answer, right? If somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, fine. I'll tell them I don't know the answer. I'm going to find you the answer and I'll get back to you. But it's almost this opportunity for you to go down one of two paths. I can mansplain my way out of this, or I can admit that I don't know the information. Either one of those two things potentially has drawbacks, right? You can look like an expert but be wrong, or you can look like less of an expert, right? But maybe be right at a later time. So I think the lesson for me is it's okay to say, I don't know. You know, we're not expected to know everything, right? So sometimes it's okay to just say, I don't know.
And I think that, again, I think we're trying to show confidence when we are mansplaining. I actually, it's way more confident to be able to say to someone else, I don't know. Because you're saying, it's not super important for me to know right now. It's okay for me to actually be honest about this. And I think that's a different level of confidence. And so I like that you brought that up, because that's probably a place that where we do get stuck, right? Like, I need to look confident versus the most confident person is someone who can just be honest and say, "Oh no, to that." Do you? I'd love to hear it. Yeah, that's cool. And so we talked about mansplaining. We knew that it was a little bit connected to a not super self-aware social cues kind of guy, Michael Scott.
But very confident.
Very confident for sure. And so let's end our Why Do Men Like This here. Now we're going to move on to a little bit of a deep dive into Michael Scott. The way that I want to start this is actually by just going back to one moment we just had right now, because it made me think so much of watching The Office for years and watching particularly Steve Carell's character, Michael Scott, in that show, because you were sitting there talking about your mansplaining moment. You're in the airport listening to a guy turn to someone else and you hadn't told the whole thing yet. But I was getting so uncomfortable just knowing where this might be going. And it didn't actually end as bad as I thought it would. I thought you were going to be like, and she said, "Oh, actually, I'm the pilot." And like, I was waiting for it to be way worse, but I was starting to
You took a breath.
internally cringe. And that made me think, oh, this is perfect, because this is the experience that the writers want when you're watching The Office, because some of the things this man did are really uncomfortable to watch happening.
I was thinking about that today. The writers, and then obviously Steve Carell as the person who put this character into motion. There were so many times where I was uncomfortable for Michael Scott, or I was uncomfortable for the people that he was interacting with, like that emotional, just like you were describing, right? Like, I'm cringing because I have the emotional intelligence to understand that this is not how normal conversations go. But clearly Michael Scott doesn't have that emotional intelligence, social awareness, understanding of social cues. I think they do a great job. Let's take a step back for a second, though, because I think it's important to talk about how we used to watch television. I joke about this with my daughters all the time, that television is now on demand, right? Where it's point and click, watch whatever you want, whenever you want to watch it. That hasn't always been the case, right? And maybe for many of the people that are watching or listening to this, they're like, well, obviously, stop mansplaining television to me. But I think that it's just something to bring up where, like, we sat and watched The Office in our college apartment, whether it was when it was on television or the DVD box sets of the Office. So it brings back those memories.
I like that you're bringing that up too, though, because I think there's something lost now, but also maybe there's something lost because of the time in our lives that we are no longer in. But
Sure.
knowing what I think it was 9:00 Thursday nights or something like that, this is when The Office is on. I remember for 2 years, I lived with the same roommates. There were 4 of us, and we would watch every single episode live. And so we would all know this Thursday night, 9 o'clock, you
We're
gotta,
doing.
you don't want to miss it. And everyone had to be quiet the whole time. Right? You can't miss something that this is your one shot.
Until one of us got a DVR or a TiVo, and it was like
Yes, that was a
game
game changer
changing.
for sure. But then we left after that laughing at the same things and having the same joke from last night. And sometimes we'd invite another apartment of 4 other people over, and and so there were these things that connected. And when you binge, now you can watch 4, 8, 12
The
episodes
whole
of
season.
something. And so not everyone's hitting the same jokes at the same time, and so they don't sink in the same way. And so I think that's very different. And
I
also,
think that's where we had a group of call it men, boys, people that said that's what she said for a very long period of time.
oh
Right?
man,
Because everybody heard Michael Scott say it at certain times in the episode. So yeah, I think there were other shows that I can think of. Growing up, I knew my parents watched ER and Grey's Anatomy and Survivor. Oh boy, Survivor was the big one for my grandmother. She would watch that one.
I think I watched
But let's
season
talk.
2 of Survivor. That was the only
I
one.
think we're on season like 42 of
Or something.
Society teaches us that having feelings and crying is bad and wrong. There is such a thing as good grief. Let's ask Charlie Brown.
So let's talk about Michael Scott. We're going to break this down, starting with who is Michael Scott? What do we know about Michael Scott's upbringing based on the show? Obviously, you and I were not involved in writing The Office.
She's not even a real person, so we are just doing what we always do and just thinking about what could this tell us about people in general.
Exactly, right? I mean, I think we get a couple of little glimpses into young Michael Scott. There's the one episode where I think they bring back he was on a television show, an old television show as a kid, and he's wearing a suit and a tie. And we'll talk a little bit about what he says during the television show.
I don't know what the prompt was.
No, I don't remember what it was either.
Whatever the prompt was, he said, I want to have 100 kids so I can have 100 friends. And
right.
So all of them will like me. And I think that just spoke volumes for what we need to know about this guy.
Yeah, it sets him up perfectly, right? Because as we think about who he is, this is a man who will do anything for people to like him, right? Yeah. To a fault.
Which also you would assume then also means, especially in that time when he was saying that on that TV show and probably throughout his life, that he had a hard time with friends. Yeah. Maybe he was isolated, left out, bullied would be my guess. Again, this fictional character who didn't actually exist in that age. But that is what I would think would lead to Michael Scott as the person that he was.
Last week, we talked about father figures or dominant male figures in your life. He does state at one point that he had, I think, a guy named Gary or somebody in his life that was his mom's boyfriend or something to that effect. And so, again, we are assuming a lot of things here. But I think that there probably wasn't that strong male figure in his life growing up.
Or even consistent male figure.
Consistent, right? Yeah, exactly. And so for him, he tried to fill that void. And so I think that some of the things that he built up to kind of cover up what I think we would both consider are pretty significant insecurities is his humor and his extreme and extraordinary confidence in himself, because that's what he needed in order to make it through this hard thing we call life, right?
Right. Well, actually, very commonly, people will develop humor as a survival mechanism, a survival skill, because I need to bridge a gap that isn't available for me. A lot of people will talk about I saw in my family parent or person in my household who was always upset or depressed, or there was a lot of fighting, and they learned how to insert themselves into situations with humor, and it would make everyone feel better, and it would make them feel this sense of value, right? My parent
Interesting.
was upset or crying or stuck in a loop of anxiety, whatever it is, and then I was able to get them out of that.
I like how you're kind of bringing that up and that kind of frame of like filling that void, filling that gap of,
Yeah.
I don't like the way you're making me feel with your emotions. So therefore, I'm going to try and change this situation up into something that's
Yeah.
going to make you laugh. Right.
But something also that it can be missed in that from the parent, right? This is just a kid trying to survive.
Sure.
I'm uncomfortable. I don't think I'm going to get support from anyone else. But what if I can make them feel better? The parent will not always see that as, oh, they must be uncomfortable too. There must be something going on that they need help with. They think of it as like, oh, wow, that felt really nice that they did that. And they give some sort of positive reinforcement that says, oh, I should do that more and I should do that again.
Interesting.
Then it kind of becomes their
Cycle.
right. It becomes their character.
Yeah.
And the parent or the family member can start to expect that and kind of puts them into that character as well.
Interesting. It almost makes me think of taking it outside of the home and bringing it into the classroom, that class clown mindset,
Yes.
and that one student who may be disruptive from a class clown perspective. Now, I may or may not be speaking from experience, uh, but that hey, he's always disruptive in the sense of he's not doing something rude or malicious, but he's just being disruptive to try to make other people
Yeah.
laugh. And I don't know if those things are connected. I don't know if that's a similar emotional coping mechanism, if you will. But as you were talking about that, it kind of made me think maybe Michael was a class clown growing
Yeah,
up.
that also makes sense because if he's saying then I would have 100 friends and everyone would like me
Right.
or everyone would have to like me, then he's saying in some way, I don't have a lot of friends and people don't like me, but if I
Right.
build a sense of humor, then maybe people will like me and maybe, or at least maybe I will get some sort of attention. Any attention is better than no attention. And so I think that is another way that humor can become a survival tactic as well. It's in social situations where you don't want to be bullied, you don't want to be left out, you don't want to be ignored. So you become a class clown. Or again, there's also other reasons you brought up. You might just be really uncomfortable with
Right.
the situation. Of course, there's lots and lots of different ones, but just thinking about him, I think we nailed a few of those there.
For sure.
So also we should talk about, right? We're talking about how he builds this sense of humor, but then we should also talk about what we learn about other ways that he, I think, is really good at creating some survival tactics throughout his life because the show starts where he is the regional manager of his office. But every time we learn about what he was like when he was just a salesman, it sounds like he was pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds like this is a situation in which we had somebody who was very skilled at sales, and we see that throughout the episodes, throughout the seasons, where he has this ability to connect with people. He has ability to recall information that he finds to be important, right? There's the one episode where he is going and speaking to a customer and recalling these facts about his life, his kids, and he wields this information from a place of, I guess you can call it power, from a place of this is what's going to get me to be successful, right? So we know that he's a good salesperson, and we also know that he may or may not be the best manager of people, right? And I think it's
Right.
interesting to think
y-
about.
Yeah, but I think thinking about the salesperson part, it actually fits well with the sense of humor
Yeah,
because his sense of humor was built as a way to protect from things that were uncomfortable. If I make people feel good around me, then I'll feel like I'm valuable and people will want to be around me. He honed that in some way in his sales. In that situation you were talking about, he wasn't using humor. I'm sure successful salespeople use humor a lot, but for him, it seemed like it wasn't just humor. There was this precision. I know, right? He had a Rolodex, right?
he did. Yep,
Like
yep.
mnemonics to remember things, but
My
he
God,
would
didn't he have it
remember.
was color coded red, yellow, and green, but it wasn't red, yellow, and green as you and I would use it. It was some
Green means go ahead and
ridiculous.
don't talk about that. Or
Right. completely
I forgot
ridiculous.
about that.
Yes.
Like, he knows I have to remember about their spouse and their child and their everything so that I can make them feel comfortable. And so it's interesting because he's so awkward and confusing and not so self-aware, it seems. And yet there's this part of him that knows exactly how to make people feel a certain way in some situations.
Well, and it's how to, we talked about how to be successful in the humor. And so we're going to just keep going back. We're going to keep talking about these memories of The Office as they pop up. But it's the episode where he kisses Jan for the first time outside the Chili's. And if you remember, Jan goes into this business meeting at the Chili's wanting it to be a business meeting. But he goes in and he starts ordering baby back ribs and
That's
singing the
right.
baby back ribs song. And he
Yeah, and
gets
they're
the
like,
cut,
this
like
is
you just
supposed to be serious, but he knew.
Right.
Yeah.
But you nailed it on the head when you said this. Like, he put the customer in a place of comfort because of his humor, but it was because of his insecurity and how to move forward with that conversation where, again, maybe that's exactly what that sale needed.
Yeah. And so I love that because you're talking about this one interaction where Jan was the bigger boss, right? She was corporate or something, yet she kept looking at him and further realizing like, oh, he's actually really good at what he does. He is actually taking care of what needs to be taken care of right now, just differently than I would have. And right, that's where she like is really impressed with him. And I think they also had a lot of margaritas or something. And so she kisses him, and we'll get to that. But it again, it's so interesting to see where he's so competent at some things, but some of it comes from this insecurity in him.
Well, and I think some of the insecurity is all about his desire for other people to like him, his need to be liked, right?
Do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked.
So I think that one, it encompasses
It's Michael.
his need to be liked as well as his lack of self-awareness. I don't need to be
Right.
liked. Well, I have to be liked.
Have to be liked.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Michael is this really kind of unique character, but I think also the need to be liked, and we think about his past a little bit. Do you think Michael ever has or has had deep friendships, or maybe friendships where he's able to build a deeper connection with people than maybe a superficial sale? And I think about you and I have a deeper friendship than I think Michael Scott did with other people. And we have things that we joke about. We have our inside jokes. Does Michael have deep relationships?
Yeah, well, I think that his relationships were all work. And I think that's common for a lot of people, that most of the people you're around are the people you work with. And so also
Spend more time with those people than my wife
Yeah.
most of the time.
But it does seem like that's it. And you can see throughout the show where he is trying to draw that. I think he's always trying to get Jim to go to lunch with him. I remember when Jim left for a while to be a part of a different office, and in the hotel, Jim's new boss and him came and said hello, and he said,
I love inside jokes. Love to be a part of one someday.
he wants to be a part of it.
Right. It's a desire to feel as if he's part of something. I think that's what he's been given, is now he is a part of everything in this office. Because he's the regional manager, it's almost given him that permission to be a part of everything that goes on in that office. And he almost takes that as a personal challenge to be involved with almost everybody's life in the office at any given time, right?
Right. And if people don't respond to him, he learns how to do that. Right.
I learned a while back that if I don't text 911, people will not return my calls. But now people always return my calls because they think that something horrible has happened.
We just looked at what this did for him as a person growing up in his career, especially early on in his career. There's probably a lot where this connects to the relationships that he developed throughout his life.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I give credit where credit is due, I don't think Michael Scott ever met a person, or in this case, a woman, that he didn't feel confident talking to. He would start a conversation. he would go up to anybody, whether it was Pam's mom at Pam's wedding, right? I think that's where,
Yeah.
that's where it all started.
Yes.
Whether it was Pam's mom, whether it was his boss, Jan. There was the episode where he goes to party with Ryan in New York, and they go to a bar, and he meets a presumably very much younger woman than him, and he calls his mom, and he tells his mom he thinks she's the one. But again, he has this confidence that
Is it
I think
confidence or is it just a complete lack of shame?
I think it's probably a mixture of both, right? And I think at
Do
some,
those have
I
to be
think,
different? Good point.
I think at some level, an extreme confidence sometimes is a lack of shame at
You know,
some point.
you might have a point.
But I would say there's times where I probably envy some of that confidence that I saw in Michael Scott. So I think that he's very desperate for a relationship, right? As we were talking about, he needs to be liked, wants to be liked, has to be liked, all the things, right? And he wants to be part of that inside joke, or wants to have an inside joke with somebody someday. But once he gets into those relationships, as we saw, I think the first one we saw was with Jan, he maybe sticks around a little long. He sticks around and maybe gets mistreated.
Snip. I've no idea the physical toll the 3 vasectomies have on a person.
Because he's comfortable with the fact that he's in a relationship. And that's
Right.
that's the place that he feels happy, right? Or at
Yeah,
least,
so that's interesting.
yeah,
You said he
safe.
feels so comfortable being in a relationship. It's almost a desperation. It's so important for him to be in a relationship.
Right?
And that's a tricky balance to have, that he's really good at making people like him, but then once he's in a relationship, he's not going to be really good at discerning, is this a good relationship for me? Am I being treated well? Are there situations that are just dangerous and bad? And do I then start to miss those signs or ignore those signs or not see them as important enough, because it's so important to be liked. It's so important to not be
Yeah.
alone, to have someone who wants to be with me, that miss that. I think that's a common thing for a lot of people in a lot of relationships as well, not even with the same exact characteristics as
Oh,
Michael Scott.
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Talking to the marriage therapist. I think that I think it's a common thing. I think people, especially people that haven't been in a lot of deeper relationships, once they get in that situation, it's almost hard for them to see the truth around them, right?
Yeah.
Whether you call it blinders or whatever you want to call it, and it's not knocking those individuals. It's not, putting down what they're able to see or not able to see. But I think, and this is not just necessarily a romantic relationship, right? We're talking about the office, right? I think this happens in work situations as well, where we get into a situation where the comfortable part of this is I have a job, I'm comfortable within that. And so therefore I'm not going to see the truth of maybe what's happening around that.
Yeah. I feel like you might have talked about this even in a previous episode we've
Yeah.
well, I think it might have been around a job, but even more so thinking about this in relationships, it's the devil you know.
There you go. Yep.
And there's I know that this is maybe a tricky relationship. I know that there are times I'm not treated well. I know I might be in a job where there are a lot of things I don't like. But just bringing it back to relationships is this idea of the devil I know also involves me not being alone. For a lot of people, it's so scary to say I might be alone and I might have to date, and I don't know how long it will be before I find someone else. Will I ever find someone else?
I was just going to ask
And
you from your perspective, does this maybe get harder for some people the longer you're in that relationship? Does it get harder to take yourself out of that because you're deeper into it and it's further away from the last time you weren't in a relationship?
yeah, I would guess that it comes in both directions. That if you've been in a relationship for a really long time, it's really scary to say all of a sudden I'm going to go out into the world and do something I haven't done in 5, 10, 25 years. I also wonder if a really tricky one is early on in some relationships when maybe you have had quite a while where you have not been with a partner. Said, "Oh my gosh, I got this," and kind of like sink in that desperation we were talking about Michael Scott before, where
Yeah.
I it if I can just hold on, this might become the one, even if we're talking about Jen, who was pretty not
Not the
nice
one.
to him. Or what else do we have? We had someone like a manager at Dave and Buster's or something, who I think was
Yep.
also married.
Well, we had his realtor, wasn't his realtor was one of his relationships, and he dug into that so far that he changed pictures with his face in place of her ex-husband's face on a family vacation, and bought tickets to go to Sandals, Jamaica.
Yep.
So yeah, I think maybe it's Michael Scott. Maybe it's the what do we do in relationships that maybe we wouldn't do outside of this, because we're trying whatever we can to make a relationship work, or trying whatever we can to for that continuity, for that sense of security and safety. So yeah, I think it kind of goes about like keeping things at all costs, right? Like Michael Scott was doing whatever he could throughout all of those relationships to stay in that relationship, to stay in that comfort zone.
Yeah, and
So yeah,
then he does finally meet someone, and there's something a little bit different about Holly, right?
yeah, Holly
Yeah.
Flax, Holly
Yeah.
Flax.
And I think the best part of it is they wrote someone into the show who was as weird and quirky and awkward as he was.
Right. I think, yeah, we talked about it yesterday. It matched his uniqueness, his weirdness, his individuality. She was the female Michael Scott, right? For so
Right.
many things.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to watch how the writers wrote their relationship. It took Michael Scott out of that comfort zone because of certain things, the moving and the new relationship that Holly got in between. And we got
Mhm.
to see how Michael reacted to that. And I think that
Right,
there
and
were certain things.
there was that idea that it seemed like, oh, this was the one, and so it hurt more. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and you talk about like how we watched the show and like we couldn't just binge it, and it was like, oh my God, are they going to get back together? I think we all sat there for a couple of weeks
Yeah.
waiting for this to happen. But I think that there was that mindset of what's going to happen. Is Michael going to be okay here? And
Yeah.
thankfully, Michael ended up with Holly.
But I think there's actually something even deeper and more beautiful about this, and we're talking about a comedy, but I think, like, they know what
Right.
they're doing, and there were a lot of love stories in it,
Oh my gosh, the whole
and
thing.
I think there's a great parallel to real life dating around him and Holly, because you see him with all of these women before who, for many different reasons, did not work out. One of them because she lived in a catalog and was a chair model or something, right? But
And she
besides the
was
point.
dead.
Also, yes, I think she's dead. But then the person he ended up being with was the right person for him, was someone who actually appreciated the uniqueness of
So
this
let me ask
person,
you.
of
Let me ask you a
genuine.
question. Does Holly change Michael? Does Holly simply fill a gap in Michael's life in a way that nobody had before? Or does Michael stay the same Michael, and Holly's just the right person at
Yeah,
the right time for Michael?
I think he found someone who fit, right? I don't think he had to change, and I think we always will grow differently with who we're with, and
Sure.
he had to learn how to grow with someone who liked his flavor for the first time ever. And of course, that might have helped him grow in some way, but I think the beauty of it is he didn't figure out how to settle. He didn't figure out how to finally just not be alone. He figured out how to find a real partner. And that's something that is really scary for a lot of people, and something that I often find myself talking to people about, is this idea of, what does dating really mean?
Mhm.
It's not, how do I convince someone to like me? It's, how do I find the person that, if I am my genuine self, they will be drawn to that, and I will also be drawn to their genuine self. And I think in so many ways that was this relationship. He didn't have to figure out how to get her to like him, and she didn't have to do that either. They were just so weird in such similar ways, and it just worked. And again, I think that was a beautiful part of it.
I love you bringing in actual relationships and actual things that people go through. I don't think it's an off the wall question to ask of how do you know who the right person is? Like, and when do you know who the right person is? And do you ever know for sure who the right person is? And I think that for me, I think the answer to those questions is constantly evolving and constantly changing as I change as a person, as my wife changes as a person, as we go through these seasons of life. But, when we first met to where we are now with children and careers, and we've bought our third home together. Like, I think there's all these questions that I think people ask themselves. They ask of their loved ones. They ask, hopefully, of their counselors and therapists who are there to help them work through some of these issues. But I think they're legitimate questions.
Yeah. And I think the lesson that feels so clear with them is everyone's actually pretty weird.
We're
You
all
just
weird.
have to find the person who your weird fits with,
That's
right? It's
it.
not try and convince someone you're not that weird or convince someone you're something you're not. It's just find the person who fits your weird because they're weird too.
You
And
should make a T-shirt.
embrace
I
it
think that,
and love
yeah.
it and be yourself.
Maybe you might put that on your business card for marriage counseling. Finding your weird.
Have you found your weird person? Have you
Love it.
accepted your person's weird?
Have you accepted your weird?
That's probably it. I love that.
Right.
Yeah, but
So
I think that's Michael and his relationships. And so that's a good part, just being able to see the trajectory, the reasons he would be in relationships, and then the beauty of what it meant to find that last one.
I'm an early bird and I'm a night owl, so I'm wise and I have worms.
Now let's shift and talk about what it was like for him to be the boss of an office, as well as what it must have been like for people to work for Michael Scott.
yeah, man, deep questions and also hysterical questions when you think about all of the antics and the things that went on in the office. So I think one of the things that I saw throughout the show is that while Stanley may have been grumpy and while Jim may have left for other reasons, the morale in the office was generally pretty good. People were generally happy. People came to work. They enjoyed the people that they were around. They enjoyed being a part of that family that Michael called it, right?
Right.
And he was able to maintain that morale because that's what he cared about. He wanted people to like him. He didn't necessarily metric himself on the sales, all of that. Now we learn that his office does pretty good, which goes to show, would you rather have an office where people are happy and not micromanaged, or an office where people are micromanaged and do their jobs very well, but maybe aren't all that happy in that situation? So
Yeah, it
for
speaks to
him,
the
I think
power
that
of morale, right? He just
yeah,
wants people to be happy and to like him and to want to be around him. And he was so focused on that he accidentally created such a successful system around him because I think especially with a sales heavy business, morale is really important and confidence is really important. He really wants people to be happy and jokes around and doesn't take things too seriously and can wave off probably important things to do because they have to have another all team meeting where he's the center of attention, but then they are also having to learn the things that he's not competent at. And I think he also was very honest sometimes about not always knowing what he's doing.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
there's parts of Michael that there's impulse control issues with Michael. We learn about a lot of different impulse control issues with him as we think about his spending habits.
I declare bankruptcy!
But again, I think it goes back when I think about the impulse control aspect of that is he buys in completely to whatever he thinks is going to make people happy, right? So whether it's trying to distract people when they think that the company is going to be sold or whatever that situation was, or remember at one point he was going to give the office like a prize or something to boost morale, but he calls coal mine to see if he could bring them on their fun ride, which was just an industrial coal elevator, right? But again, when I think
It's
back,
because he had no idea of what the prize would be, and so he was panicking.
right? But he bought into that concept of there's going to be a prize, right? And so that impulse control aspect of Michael, I think, is
He knows
something.
the thing he's aiming for, just doesn't always know the steps to fully
Bingo.
get to it.
Right.
Or
Exactly.
his impulse control, he's not actually thinking of all the steps to get there. He's just shooting.
Right. So I guess it begs the question to me. I want to ask you: would you rather be in a situation where your boss is, and now you can't answer the question like I would, which is the best of both worlds. So you have to answer this. Would you rather have a boss that is heavily focused on morale and maybe not as competent in the skills associated with their job, or somebody who is incredibly competent in their skills, but maybe morale is secondary for them in their role as a manager?
That's hard.
That's what she said.
Michael, please.
Yeah, I would definitely see how frustrating some aspects of either of them would be. And you see some very frustrating aspects in the office. But in my experience, I really would have to say the morale is probably the more important one, because when I think of every job I've ever had, the first thing that comes up is my boss and how I felt working for my boss.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember how competent they were at running the business or how helpful they were at teaching me the ropes. I just remember what it was like to interact with them on a regular basis. And most jobs that I've left were because I didn't have high morale. Maybe an obvious thing to say. But I would say if the morale is high, then the other things feel easier to figure out. I'll figure
Yeah.
it out. I'll be able to learn this. Slow and steady, I'm going to get there because it seems like they trust me and I have time and I have the space to
I'm
do
an
that.
early bird.
I like that
and
question
I'm
a
a night
lot.
owl, so
And
I'm wise.
it does feel like
and
the
I
Michael
have worms.
Scott way would be the way if I had to pick one.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say either way is the right way or the wrong way. Like you, I've had both. I've had very competent bosses. I've had competent in their skill set, competent in what they do every single day. But I think what's really interesting is in corporate America today, in the office at Dunder Mifflin, Michael Scott was elevated to a manager role because he was good at the skills of a previous job, right? His previous job was sales. The job that he was elevated to is people management. And oftentimes those two things are not related. I think that we see sometimes where people struggle in corporate America today, where they want to progress in their careers. They want to elevate themselves in their careers. And oftentimes the only way to do that is through roles that end up in people management. And that may not be something that everybody is good at, right? And so I think that it's important to think about that as we think about some of our bosses, or if some of us are bosses, and how we interact with our employees and the people that we work with every single day, of how do we balance the two of them? Because I don't think there's a whole lot of Michael Scotts out in the real world that are 100% one way and 0% the other way. There might be, and I would love if you have a boss that is Michael Scott, you have to email us. You've
Please.
got to talk to us. But I think that it's interesting to understand how that dynamic can change. What percentage do you put into morale and what percentage do you put into competence? How does that maybe shift as you progress through your time in management? I know that the first time that I moved into a people management role, the most important thing to me was that competence part. And I shifted that thinking as I progressed in my role and progressed in my career, to understand that no, at that point, yes, the competence part of it was very important, but the morale and people management part of it was also pretty critically important as well. So yeah.
Yeah, but where it gets a little tricky, I guess, too, if we're bringing this back to Michael Scott, is he put so much into this because these are the people that had to be around him. So this was friends, this was his family, this was everything, where morale was important, but like in a dangerous way.
Well, again, He didn't need to be liked. He didn't want to be liked. He had to be liked.
Right.
So those people were his family. Those people were the people that he spent time with and hung out with outside of work, or at least wanted to
Tried
so
to.
badly that he had a incredibly awkward dinner party with Jan at his house. But again, I think that I agree with you. You know, there was so much more to that Michael Scott aspect of it. So yeah.
That's what it's like to work for him. And
I want to bring up a topic that I don't think Michael Scott would want to talk about.
Ooh.
What do we think about maybe talking about Toby for a couple minutes?
Oh my
No, God!
So what
No,
do
God,
we think
please, no! No!
was
No!
the biggest problem with Toby? And so for those who haven't watched the show or don't get it from the one clip there for a second, he truly despised him. He was HR.
Yes.
Mhm.
He
And
was the one.
Holly was also HR, which I think was a weird adjustment period he had to figure
Well,
out.
if you
But
remember,
we'll
like
just
he
start
talked
with-
about,
we'll
like
just talk about Toby here.
he didn't want to like Holly in the beginning because she was HR, right?
Huh.
So, but I think that part of it too is, yes, you hit the nail on the head. He's HR. So like HR tells him what he's not allowed to do. HR tells him he's not allowed to insert the Michael Scott-ism that he would do
Anything.
anyways, right? Right. But I think Toby was also an individual, right, where Michael cared deeply about what people thought of him, at least from a viewer's perspective. That wasn't Toby's motive. So Toby was like the anti everything that Michael Scott was.
Right.
And
if it's all about morale and all about making people feel happy and laugh, the one person that's going to say you actually can't do that is going to be HR.
it's going to be Toby. Right.
But
So I
also
think-
some of that is going to be because his lack of self-awareness meant he wasn't always sensitive to whether his jokes were funny, kind, appropriate, racist,
I think we can, I think we can
a lot of
safely
different
say,
things.
I think we can safely say Michael didn't care how his jokes landed. They landed with him 100% of the time.
That's true.
And if they didn't land with somebody else, it didn't matter because it landed with him. So
See, that's interesting too, where like it's so important for him to be liked, but if his jokes are funny with him, he's like, that's their problem.
right. They're not funny. Doesn't matter.
That's
What was the joke? Him and Toby had told him they can't share chain emails or something like that, and he's telling this to the office, and Jim starts pressing on him, right, where he's like, well, that sounds like it's going to be hard or whatever it was, and Michael's response was,
that's what she said.
so there's that part of it. And so I think that I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Toby was the one who told him no. Toby was the one who didn't act in the same ways that Michael did.
Mhm.
And I think Toby was maybe that missing piece of Michael, of that emotional intelligence, social awareness, just all of the things that Michael didn't have. But again,
Right.
what did Toby not have? Well, Toby didn't have Michael's confidence, that's for sure, right? So I think that there's a place for a Michael, there's a place for a Toby, right? In all of us. So,
I love that. There's a place for Michael and a place for Toby and all of us. There's like the ego and the id.
there you go. There's probably
like
a much more educated way to say exactly what we're going around, but we're going to stick with Michael and Toby.
That's interesting. Toby having that much power though in the arc of the story, just when you think about it that way. But that's funny. But that's Michael Scott. I think it was very clear that he loved the people that were around him and wanted them to love him, and lots of reasons why it happened that way. And I think there's
Tell
a
us
little
your
bit.
tell us your favorite Michael Scott moment. Tell us what you think about Michael Scott. If you completely disagree, tell us if you think we got Michael's backstory wrong. We want to know.
Yeah, please.
We have no way of validating or verifying it unless Steve Carell watches and tells us that we we got it wrong. But let us know what your thoughts on Michael Scott are. Also, we'd love to hear those.
Yeah,
So,
but I like doing this because also thinking about it, everyone we've tried to do this with there's such human parts to them. And obviously, most of it is in comedies and they're coming out in these wild and ridiculous ways. But there is so much humanity. And if we can just continue to be curious and want to make sense of it and want to understand, I think it helps us see ourselves a little bit more too. And so I like that part of it. And like I've worked for a lot of people. I find having a sense of humor very important. I'm a manager of people in my business as well. And so I think it was useful for me to kind of put myself in those shoes as well. Of like, what does this mean about someone who maybe did some similar things to me as well? Hopefully I'm a little bit more self-aware and careful with how I do things, but
The blend of Michael and Toby, right?
exactly. You're Michael on one shoulder, you're Toby on the
I hope
other.
I hope you think about that next time you have to have a challenging conversation and you got the two of them on your shoulders.
Look on this side or this side.
That's
See which
it.
one I
I
got.
love it.
But nah,
Well,
that
no,
was
this is
really
a
good.
fun conversation. I think I think we can all relate to it, whether it's looking at Michael in the office, looking at Michael in his relationship. So yeah, it was
Love it.
great.
I feel like all my kids grew up and then they married each other. It's every parent's dream.
So let's talk about some mistakes, some wins, and some challenges from this past
Yeah.
week. So this week, our mistake came from someone who chose to remain anonymous but used Obi-Wan Kenobi as their alias. So thank you, Obi-Wan Kenobi, for reaching out to
He is our only hope, according to
you are our only hope. And so we heard from Obi-Wan that he was taking care of his toddler and is always trying to be very careful and aware of what's going on with her, and was just a little bit too far away at one point, and she climbed up on something and pulled a chair down and fell over and started crying, and she is okay. Perfectly okay, actually. But it, I think, is a great example of we aren't always as careful as we think we are, and we are always going to mess up. And this is also one of those examples of kids are washable, where
kids are washable.
I think we have a different sense when something feels truly, truly dangerous. And of course, that's not always true. Sometimes something will happen that we just didn't foresee, but they still get hurt. And it's still sad when they're very young and then they cry and you have to console them. And that's part of being human. And so thank you for sharing that one with us. I think that was a really good and vulnerable and honest mistake to share.
Yeah,
with
well,
us.
it's
But
okay to make a
that
mistake.
begs the question then, right? We're sharing our mistakes. Should we find a win to celebrate here as well with
We can
might
find a
know?
win. We can find a win. So I'll give you a win. It's my win, actually,
Yes.
for the week. I got a paper accepted into publication. So as part of my job, I write papers and for scientific publications. So a big, humongous, massive shout out to all the co-authors on the paper. Don't do this myself by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll share the win together. It feels good. It's always challenging to, right, in the first place, find the time to do that, but then go through the review process for those that have done it. Not fun. So that's the win.
Love that though. Hard work, diligence, perseverance, teamwork.
There we go.
Love it.
Teamwork. Yeah. Big on the teamwork, big on the co-authors, big on the people around me. So yeah.
There
All
you
right.
go.
We got a challenge. Tell us what the challenge is, Alex.
All right. So Noah reached out to us. So enjoy your sticker. Hope you do something funny with that. Oh, Bobby, we have to send you a sticker because of your win then. Thank you for
on the back of my iPad every single day.
love it. That's good. And get you a little poop sticker put under there.
Right. Perfect.
But yes, Noah reached out and he shared a challenge. He picks up his child from school in the late afternoon every day, and she's not so old, so she goes to bed pretty early. So his challenge was in just those 2 or 3 hours in the day, he wants to be away from his phone. And not everyone can do this, of course, because like some people's jobs don't end or have other important things that they need to be doing. But when you can, it's a different story. And he was saying that what feels important for him is that if his phone is not around him, he's already showing up in a different way. He doesn't have to wonder, should I be checking? Is there something that may be important? Right? Like you can be a different level of present. And however quick we think we're going to be when we check our phone, then 10 or 15 minutes later when we realize that, ooh, something shiny caught our attention and then something shinier and something else over there, that's always a bummer because it wasn't because it was a priority. We didn't do that because it mattered more. But then we realized something that did matter more accidentally took a backseat. And I loved that. I loved that he wanted to lean into something being a priority, feeling like he's making it a priority so that he can be bonding with his child and teaching his child what it means to have someone who's going to be available and accessible to them. And so I really appreciated that. And right there's an honesty in that one as well, knowing this is this thing that I do have a hard time with, but being able to say it out loud and to kind of own this is something I want to look at, that means a lot that people are sharing those kind of things with us.
One of the things that I love about the challenge is there's guardrails put up on that challenge. It's I want to do XYZ from this point in time to this point in time, right? Sometimes that, and I know I've done this myself, is I want to put my phone down and I don't want to use my phone as much around my kids. That's great, but there's no guardrails on that, right? And so what I love about this is there is an achievable, like measurable metric of from this time to this time. And so anyway, good job, Noah. Love it. Appreciate you sending this in. And if there's anything we can together on with that challenge, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. And so everyone else, if you're listening to this and thinking there's some mistakes, some wins, some challenges I want to share, please let us know. We do actually have a few stickers left, and so these people did get them today. Again, remember to do something funny with it. Get us out there. We love seeing that our listens are going up, our ratings are going up. We want people to be able to find this, and so we really, really appreciate everyone who has contributed to making that real for us, and just really appreciate you all.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better.
All right, and so we will look forward to seeing everybody next week when we continue to man up together. Cool.
The Man Up Together podcast was produced and edited by Alex Peskin and Bobby Jacobs. Special thank you to our wives, family, friends, and coworkers who have supported us in so many ways throughout this process. You can find us on Instagram at Man Up Together Podcast, and you can email us at questions@manuptogetherpodcast.com. If you are interested in joining us on this journey, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone you care about. Thank you for listening. See you next week.